Hello, this is Visitations Conversations. The purpose of this program is to provide inspiration to people aspiring to go deeper into the world of comics and entertainment. Please check out the channel for interviews that range from comic creators, podcasters, cosplayers, and filmmakers. My name is Scott Larson, and I am the creator of the independent comic book series Visitations. Visitations is the history of Chicago as seen through the eyes of the residents of the city's oldest cemetery. It's part history, part adventure, and part horror story all rolled into one. It's kind of like The Untouchables meets Indiana Jones in a graveyard. If you'd be interested in reading a digital copy of the first issue for free, please email me at visitationscomicbook@gmail.com or click the link below. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to have back on the show J.M. Dematteis. For anyone who doesn't know who he is, J.M. Dematteis has done a range of just about everything in the comic book world. He is well known for his Justice League book and Kraven's Last Hunt. Justice League for DC, Spider-Man for Marvel Comics, and he's done just about everything in between. So, JM, if you'd be willing to turn your stuff on, we're all set to chit-chat.
Voila.
There you are. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. So I've got a question for you. I can't.
You have a question?
Yes, a couple of questions. I can't turn on my social media nowadays without the first thing I'm seeing is this Dematteis universe. It's popping up all over
the DeMultiverse. Yes, it's certainly popping up all over my feed.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the first Kickstarter I've ever done, and the joke is it's not just my first; it's my second, third, and fourth, because we're launching 4 new series simultaneously, 4 new books, 4 different genres, 4 different amazing artists, all under the umbrella of a new imprint called Spellbound Comics. And it is one of the single most exciting things I've ever done in my career. It's been exhilarating. It's been slightly terrifying and anxiety inducing, and it's been overall just a delight. And we're really just getting started. We've been working on this, for like a year and a half now, putting this together. We just launched last Tuesday. We hit our goal in a couple of hours, but that goal was a goal that we set just to assure people, yes, once the goal is met, that means you're going to get your books. But in order for us to really be able to do this right and continue beyond these first 4 books, we really need to continue throughout the month to bring people in and take them along on this journey with us.
So you have 4 different genres. So before I ask you about that, you have all kinds of different genres under your belt anyway. Whether it's dramatic or superhero-y or comedy or anything else. So what are the genres you're working with here?
So, well, you want me to just go through the 4 books that might help us do it? Okay. So the first one is called Wisdom. It's a supernatural Western that I'm doing with Tom Mandrake. If you know Tom Mandrake's work, then you know that he is a master of the supernatural, but he's also a master of the Western. So he is really the perfect artist to do this book. Wisdom, our one-liner on it is Deadwood meets the Lord of the Rings. It's on one hand, it's a very, very gritty Western. On the other hand, it's a huge epic fantasy that deals with magic and the supernatural. And it's a story, like many of these stories, that I've been nursing for about 12 years now. And having Tom bring it to visual life is a dream come true. I'm familiar with Tom's work from going all the way back to the Spectre with John Ostrander, which was, I guess, back in the 80s. I've always admired his work. And the only thing we've ever done together before now, I think he did some work when we were doing Scooby Apocalypse, a story here or there, but we've never done a major piece of work together. And I have to say, his work on Wisdom is some of the most beautiful work I've ever seen him do.
I think I bought his first stuff when he was doing Batman, even before he was doing the Spectre back in.
It was perfect for Batman, yeah.
So I've got a couple of questions about that. So is it a period piece? Does it take place in like the 1800s?
Oh yeah. 1860s and before, because we are following the main character through his entire life. Gabriel Wisdom is the main character, who starts out as a very, very innocent soul, and through a very traumatic journey during which he loses both his wife and his daughter, he becomes first a truly savage, soulless gunman, and then evolves into a sorcerer who is tasked with protecting the world from a dark force that's coming to take us all, while at the same time trying to rescue his wife and his daughter from those very same forces. It's a big story. It's that's why I say it's Deadwood meets Lord of the Rings, because it's epic. It's really, really epic.
So when you say it starts like way before, are you thinking like decades before, centuries?
Well, no, not way before in that way. Way before in terms of his lifespan. So
Okay.
that while we have a story unfolding in, quote, the present day of 1865, or I forget the date, whatever it is, 1870, we're going back and we're also exploring his life from birth to see what led him to this point, as we will be doing with several other characters as the series continues. And our hope is that all 4 of these series will continue. One of the really fun things that we've got going is, if you're someone who is supporting the Kickstarter, or you can actually buy these books at spellboundcomics.com if you're not a Kickstarter-y person. If you buy all 4 of the titles, or you buy our big 100+ page collected edition, you get to vote on which of these series will be the first to continue. Our hope is that all of them will continue, but we have to start with one. So you get to vote, which is kind of a cool thing. I've been saying one of the things I really love about Kickstarter is that wall between audience and creator just got a little bit thinner. And by having people participate and vote, that wall gets thinner still, because you get to really say, you have a say in the future of Spellbound Comics and the future of my career, you know?
So how much of the story do you have mapped out?
A lot.
Okay.
A lot, because this is an idea I've been nursing for years, at least 12 years.
12 years.
And when I first got the idea, as I've said to several people, it came to me as a movie in my head. I woke up one morning and I started seeing this Western unfolding in my head, ran to the computer to write it down. And then I started developing these notes. I probably ended up with 40 or 50 pages of notes about what the story is and where it's going. I had to cut it down, because you can't have people reading a 50-page document when you're pitching. You just can't, but there's a lot there. And then, of course, you dive in, you start doing all this wonderful research about the era and the people that were alive then. And so you get to weave in real history with your fantasy. And it's been quite a journey. I don't know if you saw on Twitter the other day, I put up a picture of myself when I was about 4 years old in my cowboy outfit with my cowboy hat, riding my hobby horse, because when I was a kid, Westerns were just everywhere. And that was just such a part of the fabric of my life growing up. So here I am all these years later, and I think it's the first time I've ever written a Western. I don't think I've ever written a Western story before.
Where you said that you're researching history, where does this story take place? Does it take place in like California or Texas, or?
It takes place all over, because one of the things with our main character is, as he's going about seeking out and rooting out these forces, what he has a traveling show. Because he starts out as an actor years before, not a very good one either. But so they roll into town and everyone comes out and he gives a performance. He does a little Shakespeare. He sings a song. He does a magic act. But all of that is just a front as they can travel from place to place. So it takes place all across the West, and we'll end up at some point at the edge of California, at the edge of the ocean somewhere. Yeah.
And then what history did you research for it? Did you research just general history, or were there?
Yeah, especially, anything I could read about the Old West. And once you know how it is, especially with the internet, once you start going down that rabbit hole, and reading about this outlaw and reading about what happened here and what was Dodge City like and what was this like and what was that like. So all that just becomes stuff that you stuff in your head and you forget about, and then you just let it come out naturally as you're unfolding the story.
That sounds really cool. So what's the second book?
There are 3 others. Let me pick one at random. I don't have. You pick a name. You tell me.
I don't have the names in front of me.
Okay, well then I will tell you instead. Okay. The next one is called Layla in the Lands of After. I'm doing this one with Sean McManus. Now, Sean and I worked together years ago at DC on Dr. Fate, one of my favorite projects ever, one of my favorite artists ever, and also one of the nicest people in the business that I've ever worked with. And we have wanted to, we same thing. We started talking about this project at least 12 years ago. Pitched it around, didn't get it sold, pitched it one place, did sell it, had a problem with the contract, had to walk away. It's just the nature of the freelance life that's the way it goes. I always feel like I've said before, The story is alive. The story is always looking for the perfect venue, the perfect way to get out the door and get out into the world. And all these little rejections that we face along the way that may be frustrating to us are actually just the story finding its right venue. And I think now Layla has found its right venue. So this is an all ages fantasy in the tradition of, if anyone who's read my work who knows Abadazad or the Stardust Kid, Augusta Wind, series like that. It's about a girl named Layla, 13 years old, coming home one night from her best friend's house, biking home, coming down a hill. All of a sudden, she's enveloped in a ball of light. She's carried away over the rainbow, through the looking glass, however you want to put it, to Oz, to Neverland, to Wonderland, to this magical, incredible world, until she discovers that this magical, incredible world that she's landed in isn't Oz or Wonderland. It's the afterlife, and she's dead. That light that enveloped her was the light of the car that ran her down. And she decides, wait a minute, I'm 13 years old. I have a whole life ahead of me. I refuse to be dead, and I'm going to find a way to get back to life. So she, in the company of her dead cat and her grandfather and another character called the Not Quite Fallen Angel and other characters they meet along the way, begin this quest through the many lands of after, and there are many of them, because there are as many heavens as there are souls. There are as many afterlives as are, whatever your conception of the afterlife is, you manifest it when you get there. So it's infinite. So they have to move through many lands on this quest to maybe, or maybe not, get Layla back home to life.
That sounds really, really cool. So, you and I, during our last conversation, we talked a little bit about death and our different impressions of it. And that's a quick way of mentioning that. Where did the idea of the infinite heavens come from? I mean, were you thinking about that? Because, and this is why I'm going to ask this. When I look back at your work, and specifically when you were working on Spider-Man, and you dealt with a lot of death things there, and a lot of the death things that you dealt with there were a little torturous, I'm going to say. Whether it was Craven coming back or it was Carrion and the dreams he was having about all the different people he had killed. And you had him as, I mean, the way it was drawn was as like almost like a funnel of people going up. And this sounds very different from that. And so I'm curious.
Well, you can't be alive without thinking about death, right?
Sure.
You just can't. I mean, in my autobiographical graphic novel, Brooklyn Dreams, I write about an experience I had when I was 4 years old, when I first became aware of death. And I don't know how, what, or why. I was 4 years old in the bathtub, happy as a clam. No one said anything. No one did anything. Nothing happened. But all of a sudden, my consciousness changed, and I became aware that we are limited on this earth. Mm-hmm. I don't know where it came from, some past life memory, what it is. And it was like, whoa, we're all going to die, And I still remember my parents coming in the room and my father saying, don't worry, we're all going to die, but not for a long, 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 long time. And then I blink, and here I sit, and my father's been dead for how many years, and my mother's gone. And, so you can't be alive and not think. A lot of people don't want to think about it. But, as a writer, you have to think about everything. That's my nature anyway, probably why I became a writer. There's no little stone in my head that has not been overturned. And sometimes there's an angel underneath there, and sometimes there's a demon, and sometimes it's a maggot, and sometimes it's the most magnificent thing you've ever seen. So I've always been fascinated with the question of death and afterlife. I've read a lot of books, a lot of what different mystical traditions say about the afterlife. You hear about these people that have near-death experiences and come back, and then they tell you what they claim is the definitive view of the afterlife. And I developed, so one of the things I came across, and it really makes sense because I think it's the truth of our lives here, we're all projecting all the time what our lives are and creating what our lives are. And my idea is that the lands of after are basically composed of mind and imagination. So whatever your expectation is what you're going to create. If you think heaven is going to be angels playing harps floating on clouds, you'll get that. If you're someone who was raised to feel guilt over everything you've ever done wrong and you think you're going to burn in hell, you'll create hell. Layla's grandfather's vision of heaven was that he's going to be 10 years old again living in Chicago playing stickball in the streets with his friends. That was his heaven. And more and more and more. And then, of course, you move beyond those concepts the longer you stay, the more you evolve. And the other thing that made me think about all this is because of those books where these people come back, they have a near-death experience and they tell you what heaven was like. Except what I came up with is, imagine you're an alien on another planet and you want to know what life on Earth is like. And so you make a phone call, and the first person that picks up the phone is living in a slum in Mumbai. Mm-hmm. So what's life like on Earth? I live under a piece of tin. I have no money. I have to beg for food. My existence is really, really difficult and hard. I'm frightened. Okay. Someone else says, and then this guy comes back and says, I know what life on Earth is. It's living in a tin shed in Mumbai and da 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 da. And then someone else makes a phone call and they get Bill Gates on the phone. What's life like on Earth? So, well, I'm the richest man in the world, or one of them. I have 10 private planes. I have 50 houses. I can do anything I want. People will bow to me and kowtow to me. And so life on Earth, everyone there is a billionaire, blah, blah. So there are as many stories about what life on Earth is as there are people on Earth. So my feeling is there are as many afterlives as there are souls that go into the afterlife. And it's a fun concept to play with. Plus, it allows our story, as we go forward with it from here, to unfold through any landscape we can imagine. And Sean is one of the best fantasy artists out there. I don't know if there's anybody better. There may be people as good, but there's nobody better.
I have a comment to make, and I also have a question. So, but the comment is really quick, and you can react to it or not if you choose. Many years ago, I was reading a book, and I don't remember the name of it. And I think it had to do with the nature of God. It had to do with the nature of death. And apparently there are some hospitals, there's always the story of someone dying on the operating table. And then they float up over the body and they see everything, and they see their friends and everything else. There are some hospitals that decide to test this. And so they put something on the floor, something very specific, a pattern or a design or something. And because they wanted to see if the person who has a near-death experience saw that. It didn't tell nobody knew that it was there. And what they found was that nobody saw it. And that's the commentary that I had. It's when you were talking about this, I was kind of reminded of that, and I don't remember the name of the book. But I found that really interesting.
But there are just as many stories of people that not only don't stay in the operating room, they go elsewhere where there are other things happening, not even in the hospital, but elsewhere completely. And they come back when they're back, and they can report these conversations or what they saw exactly, and they get verified. So I mean, just to play, devil's advocate. Sure. I walk through my day. How many things do I not notice?
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? If you're floating out of your body, first thing you're going is, I'm floating on my body. That's my body down there. There's some doctors, and then usually they go off someplace else anyway. So that they didn't notice a pattern on the floor, to me, is
I think the pattern was like something that said hi or something like that. I mean, it was something really specific, and I'm not trying to debunk anything.
Right? No, I understand. There's no answer. There's no clear answer to this. But I think there have been enough stories and enough verified stories over the years that we know that something is going on. There's this sort of mindset that says, it's just the brain firing something. Well, that might explain a little bit of this, but it doesn't explain the person who ends up at their sister's house 50 miles away and sees what they're going through and hears the conversation and comes back and reports it,
And there's all kinds of strange things that happen in the world. And I don't think you need to be dead to see it.
Right, exactly.
It's just and I could talk to you about that for hours, but we don't have hours. So I've got a question for you on this. So she discovers she's dead. Do we see the family she left behind at all? Do we see their reaction? Do they?
In the first issue, we see them a little bit. I don't want to say more about that because it hinges on there's a plot point that it hinges on with the family. Okay. So, but yes, we will see them, and as the story goes along, we will probably see more of them.
How emotional was this for you? Was this particular story very emotional, or was it?
All the stories are emotional. because, what were you saying about it being all ages? I'm sorry, say that again.
Oh, you said that the story was all ages. And when I said emotional, obviously we love our stories, the stories that we're telling. But I think you had mentioned real quick, you had mentioned the story when you were 4 years old and you realized that you were going to die. That moment for me actually came when I was 16, and believe it or not, I got it when I was reading that panel in Craven's Last Hunt where Peter Parker was laying on the bed like this, and he's like, I'm going to die someday, and this person's going to die someday, and this person. And my mom had actually already passed. But that was really the moment where I realized that this is all passing. And that, I mean, that's a heavy thought.
Yes,
and there's a lot of heavy emotions in some of your work. And so when I say, is this emotional, if it's something for all ages, I assume that it can't be that heavy of emotion.
Well, I don't see why not. I think,
okay.
The best literature for young readers is just as sophisticated as the best literature for adults. There's a great Madeleine L'Engle quote, and I looked it up again today. She said, when I want to write about, and this is not it exactly, but it's the general idea. When I want to write about something very difficult, I'll write it for children. The best children's literature, like Madeleine L'Engle's work, Wrinkle in Time and all those books, is filled with sophisticated ideas, and you can run very deep emotions. This idea that writing for children means writing, I don't know, la-di-da, nothing can upset you or disturb you in any way, and it just has to be, well, yeah, if you're writing for a 4-year-old, but if you're writing for an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, it's a whole different thing. And I love children's literature and young adult literature, and some of the writing is, something as what we think of as simple as Winnie the Pooh. Read those books. That's incredibly sophisticated writing in those books. And Oz and Narnia, Mary Poppins, all these wonderful books. Harry Potter.
Right.
So no, it doesn't limit me. And it certainly doesn't limit the emotions you want, no matter what you're writing, no matter who you're writing for. If you're writing a picture book for a 4-year-old, in some way, you want an emotional connection.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have an emotional connection. And if you're dealing with a story like this, it has to be emotional for a girl to wake up and realize what's happened to her, and that she wants to get home and she wants to see her family, even though she's found these people that she's lost. It's the story's about loss, because she hasn't seen her grandfather in how many years, and he was like one of the most important people in her life. And yet now, do I stay with my grandfather? But I want to go back. I want to live my life. So there's a lot of emotion in this story, but there's also lightness and there's whimsy. And Sean brings tremendous amount of lightness and whimsy to his drawing. There's always a little hint of humor in everything Sean does. And this is, again, some of his best work. It's being colored by a wonderful colorist named Arthur Hesley, who's doing a great job. And I'm proud of all these books. I think because Sean and I go back so far together, it's just really exciting that we finally got to do this thing we've been talking about for so many years.
When was the last time you worked with him?
Probably 10 years ago, I would think, or more. I was, for a brief time, I was editor-in-chief of a company, the name of which completely escapes me because it wasn't for a long time. My friend Brendan Deneen was running the company. Why can't I think of the name? Anyway, we had the rights to Flash Gordon. We had a Flash Gordon comic, a few other comics we were working on, and we did a Flash Gordon anthology. Brendan, I'm sorry that I blanked on the name. And Sean and I did a really, really fun story about Ming the Merciless together about 10 or 12 years ago.
How much does your character...
Arden Entertainment, that's what it was called, Arden Entertainment.
How much does the character grow? So for example, the purpose of all these stories is to get a character from one spot to another, and there is always an emotional growth. You said she was 13 years old?
Yeah.
And I'm talking about emotionally, but I think that's appropriate here. How much does she actually grow? So the grandfather, and I'm assuming that the grandfather, since he kind of goes backwards to be a 10-year-old.
Oh, he's not, but that was his initial heaven. He's not 10 years old when she meets him.
Okay.
He comes to her as she needs him to be.
Mm-hmm.
See, because this is a world where thought and manifestation are the same thing. So this is what she needs. She needs her grandfather in that form. Now he
Does
may
she
turn
see
it.
his heaven?
Not well, so this is only one issue here. So
Okay.
What's going to happen along the way? We're going to be visiting a lot of different places. So she might see his heaven along the way, and he may be 10 years old again along the way.
Okay. All right. But I'm assuming that she has the normal character arc where she grows and changes as a character as she goes.
Well, she has to. In fact, even in this very first issue, because Layla is she's a brilliant student. She's chronically shy. She's socially awkward. She has an anxiety disorder. She's in therapy. And yet the first thing she has to do is find the courage to say, I'm not staying here. I want to go back. I want to go back. It's completely out of character for her in a lot of ways, but she needs to go back. And so through the course of this journey, yes, you will obviously see her change and grow.
And then one more quick question on this. So many years ago, you did the Spectre yourself, and you did the Hal Jordan Spectre, and Abin Sur was his guide.
Yes.
Was there anything that you found when you were doing that series, either before you started working on this new one or afterwards, that you thought that's a good idea that's going to go into this book?
From the Spectre, not particularly. No, I loved that run. I loved working with Ryan Silk and Norm Brayfogle, and it was one of those mainstream books like my run on Dr. Fate, where even though it was quote a mainstream established DC character, it was more like a creator-owned book because I had the freedom to do what I wanted to do with that character and tell exactly the kind of stories that I wanted to tell. But no, I mean, beyond the fact that there probably in Dr. Fate and other things I've written, I have dealt with these concepts of the afterlife a little bit. There was a Dr. Fate story that Sean and I did where he traveled through various afterlives, but they were just quickly glimpsed. But that was, if there was a seed to this in terms of my comic book work, it's probably in Dr. Fate somewhere.
Okay.
But I didn't think about the Spectre, except for the fact that everything that I do echoes into everything else I do, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Okay, so the third book.
So what did we cover? We did Wisdom,
we covered the
did
Western,
Layla, and we did Layla.
Right.
Okay, so the third one is Any Man. Any Man is probably, on the surface at least, the closest to a traditional superhero story. It's got phenomenal art by David Baldion, who I just finished recently the Reilly Spider-Man miniseries. Became a huge fan of his work as we were working on that, and was so delighted that he agreed to join us on this journey. And so the basic setup is, and this is another big story, the Layla story is obviously a big story. This takes place over the course of 50 years between 1969 and 2019. So in 1969, a portal opens in Times Square, and through it comes a costumed figure who has come from millions of years in the past, from a civilization, a prehistoric, not prehistoric in terms of dinosaurs, but prehistoric in terms of prehistory. A perfect, civilization. You could call it Atlantis or Krypton or whatever you want, although it has its own name in the book, obviously. A perfect world that, unfortunately, their own arrogance, their own hubris brought this whole civilization crumbling down. He has now come from that millions of years in the past to what he claims is a crisis point in our world. And his goal is to help us prevent what happened to his civilization from happening to ours. And over the course of the next 50 years, Any Man was the name that he takes, becomes the hero that the world needs. He's looked up to, he's admired, he's revered around the world. And there's only one little problem, and the problem is that this entire story that he's fed the world is a lie. So the question becomes, who is Any Man? What's his agenda? Why is he here? Who created him? And beneath that, even once we unravel that, there's another twist beneath that. And I don't want to give any of that away.
Okay.
So it's, on the one level, it's a traditional superhero story. On another level, it twists itself around and becomes very non-traditional.
Why 1969?
When I think of crises for our modern civilization, having grown up in the 60s, in the age of the Cuban Missile Crisis, assassinations, Middle East wars, riots in the streets, protests, all these things. that was a massive crisis point for us. And it seems like the 60s would be a perfect time for someone to show up and say, hey, you guys are really on the verge of collapsing here. I'm here to help you avoid that. And the fun of the story is we jump back and forth through time over the course of those 50 years. While we're telling a story in the quote present day of 2019, we're also jumping back to various points in that 50-year span.
So are you covering, well, real quick. So my dad always said 1968 was the worst year he had ever experienced. And I had heard that from a number of different people. I think the past couple of years could probably give that a run for its
I think we're in a time now that although the events are different, the traumatic energy is very, very similar.
Yeah. And I could say a whole lot about that, but we don't have time.
We don't have time. We could do a whole hour on that. Yeah.
We don't. Oh, yeah, I know, and it's all very interesting. But I mean, some of the stuff that's going on, but that's again. So did you look at a lot of history in that?
I don't have to look at a lot of history for this one because I lived through it.
Sure.
One of my primal memories, I was in 4th grade during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And, the first president I remember in my life was JFK.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I really remember JFK getting on TV and giving a speech that roughly translated meant, hey, you know what? Tomorrow the world may not be here. Mm-hmm. It was really, really clear. We were that close. Close. And if you look at history, we really were that close to those missiles flying and nuclear Armageddon.
Sure.
And I ran into my room, and I don't know if I'd ever actually prayed before that moment, and dropped to my knees and prayed to God not to let the world be destroyed. And I remember walking to school with my friends the next morning, and the conversation was basically, think we're all going to die? You think we're going to be here tomorrow? It doesn't get more traumatic than that. And then the next year, Kennedy's assassination, and the year after that, and there was always something going on. So I don't give the wrong impression. The story is not focused on the 60s in that way.
Sure.
That's part of the story.
Sure.
And we'll go back and visit that. But it's a broad story. And the main body of the story takes place in quote present day 2019.
Mm-hmm. It was really interesting. I tried to avoid the news just because I'd like to be happy.
Sometimes, sometimes it's really important to not look at it for a period of time.
Oh yeah.
Just detox.
But for whatever reason, I don't know why I did this. The other morning I got up and I thought to myself, I wonder where the doomsday clock is now, the doomsday. And
what a great thought.
Well, and it was like 5:30 in the morning too. So I don't know why, but anyway, I took a look, even through history, and even in that, I mean, not including those 4 or 5 days of the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1963, we were pretty far away. I mean, right now, I think we're like a minute and a half to midnight. And I think in 1963, we were 7 minutes away.
But I would imagine that during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were about 60 seconds away.
I would assume so as well. I was kind of surprised at, and I don't even know if they measured that.
Right.
Because that event was so, it was there and it was gone.
Well, here's the flip side of all that. Having lived through all that stuff.
Yeah.
And guess what? I dropped to my knees, I prayed, and we all were scared. And guess what? We came through it.
Sure.
We came through so many things. And somehow through all this, despite the fact that even right now it looks like chaos and insanity and people are so polarized, we keep growing. And if you look at really the arc of what's happening, we are growing and we're moving forward. I'm an optimist. I just am. And, I don't ignore the darkness. But I call that the skin of the world. And I always feel like when you peel back the skin of the world, there's some other very different reality, and a very positive one.
Sure.
Thrumming along just beneath that.
The way I look at it, if you don't mind me saying real quick.
I mind.
Okay. Well, forget it. This interview's over.
Okay.
The way I tend to look at that, and especially with what's been happening over the course of the past few years, is, my dad fought in World War II. And I have family that goes back to the Civil War, and you hear these stories, and it was interesting because I was talking to my wife today, and she was talking about the Depression, and I'm like, well, I grew up in a Depression era household, even though, and that was ingrained into my personality. I always think from that perspective. of, what if, blah, 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 which is not an optimistic point of view, but it was ingrained in me because my dad carried it with him
Right.
emotionally to the
Well,
day.
it's like if people that grow up with parents who are Holocaust survivors, they were not there, but they absorb every iota of that. Yeah.
Right. But with World War II and even like with the Civil War, you take a look and it was like these heroic escapades, it's like brother against brother, and you don't really understand the underlying emotions, I'll say, behind everything. You knew the Nazis were evil, but you didn't really understand. You understood it, but from an intellectual standpoint, not necessarily an emotional standpoint. When I take a look at some of the stuff that's been happening over the course of the past few years, it really helps me understand those eras better. And so it helps me take a different view of history, and for better or for worse.
Right.
And it's interesting. And that's the way I look at it. Is it's interesting. You don't know what'll happen tomorrow, but a lot of this stuff is kind of fascinating to see that there are these previous generations and this stuff comes back to you.
Yes.
And
what
it
is the
doesn't
quote?
really go
Is the
away.
quote, those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, right? Isn't that the line?
It is, but I think that there's a common human experience with some of this stuff where we almost have to recycle this stuff, not out of ignorance, but out of understanding, if that makes sense.
No, I know it's facing the same trauma again and hopefully growing through it.
Right.
Yeah. But you want to grow through it. You don't want to just keep repeating without growth.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. No, and then we should move on. Sure. But I don't know if you've seen the PBS documentary, The U.S. and the Holocaust, that just ran recently.
No, I have not.
It's not an easy watch, but it's really worth watching. Watch it slowly, because this is not a show you want to binge,
Sure.
Just from the title, it's not a show you want to binge. And you do see some disturbing parallels between then and now.
Is that a Ken Burns thing, or is it something?
It is. It's Ken Burns' newest documentary.
I didn't know. I know he did that Vietnam thing a few years back, and he did that thing on the Roosevelts, and I hadn't really seen anything past that. So that's interesting. I'll take a look.
Yeah. Okay.
Definitely.
So the next book, again, we can do an hour on any of these sidebars here, is called Godsend. Okay. Godsend, my one-liner on that is Kirby Gods meets Philip K. Dick meets The Matrix.
Okay.
I am, as you know, fascinated with stories of personal identity, who we think we are versus who we are, our psychological identity, our cosmic identity, our spiritual identity, and then the same thing with reality itself, what we take reality to be versus kind of what we were just talking about, the reality that exists beneath the skin of the world. We think reality, we have these assumptions about what, quote, reality is, and more often than not, those assumptions can be wildly wrong. So our main character is named Eric Small. He's a junior high school teacher. He's middle-aged. He's overweight. He's in bad health. He's depressed. He's lonely. He's got like one friend. It's not a good life. He grew up in an abusive household. And into this gray little world of Eric Small, and not just his world, but the world in general, drops this celestial being that the media dubs Godsend. They call him that, but we really don't know. Is he a godsend, or is he maybe he could be a force for evil? We're not really sure who or what this guy is. He's almost like a living UFO in the sense that everybody has different theories about what UFOs are. There's kind of what we're talking about with Layla. As many people as there are, you could have as many theories about what are these things. So that Godsend is this mystery that descends into the world and into Eric's life, and he becomes, speaking of obsessed, he becomes obsessed with Godsend in the same way that Richard Dreyfuss was obsessed with the UFOs in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It becomes the central driving force of his life. And then one day, he wakes up on his couch, and standing in his living room is a 7-foot-tall being with the body of a turtle and the head of a man, who basically orders him to get on his back and flies him out the window. And basically all of Eric's assumptions about reality explode. All his assumptions about who he is and what the world is explode. And the story goes on from there. And I don't want to say more about that. The art is by my buddy Matthew Dow Smith, who's a wonderful, wonderful artist. We've worked on a couple of things before. Most recently, about 2 years ago, we did a wonderful Star Trek story for IDW called Hell's Mirror, which was the Mirror Universe version of the Khan story, Space Seed, but told through the Mirror Universe. It was really, really fun. And we've been looking for something big to work on together. And I've been this is probably the idea that goes the farthest back out of any of them, because I think I started working on this in the early 2000s. And I pitched Matt on this idea, and we were originally just going to do it. Matt had been doing on Twitter, putting out original work like 5-6 pages a week on Twitter, just putting it out into the world to get it out. And we originally were talking about that. Oh, we can do 6 pages a week. Why not? We'll just put it out through social media. And so I wrote a big chunk of this. In fact, probably most of the first issue and a good chunk of the second issue done in these 6-page little chunks, which I then had to rearrange and play with to get this into our first issue. And Matt has done just such a beautiful job with this, both in capturing that kind of Kirby God elegance and power, but also Matt's greatest strength, I think, is his ability to show humanity. You look at the faces of the people and you see the expressions and you see the emotions, you see the gestures, and these people are real and they're alive. And, it's great to do stories that deal with gods, but any story, if you're not grounded in real humanity, you're lost. And he brings so much humanity to this project. And Matt has a very unique, distinctive style that is very, very much his own. And it's been, all these guys. I feel so incredibly lucky. And on top of that, for every book, we have an alternate cover by a big name artist. We have J.H. Williams III, who's doing Layla. Did a beautiful cover for Layla. Dustin Yen, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Amazing artist, is doing a cover for Wisdom. Kevin McGuire doing the cover for Any Man, and then we have a 4th mystery artist, which we'll probably announce toward the end of the campaign. And Liam Sharp, the great Liam Sharp, is doing the cover for the collected edition. He's already done it. We put that out on social media. It's like, I told Liam, as soon as I saw it, I want to blow this up into a poster and hang it in my office. It's like the DeMultiverse, the movie, it's just the greatest movie poster ever. And so what else do I need to cover here? Something that really important to know is that all of these books are almost done. So by the time this campaign is over, the books are done. We'll have to put together the trade paperback, because we're going to have extras. I'm going to write introductions. We'll have all artwork and scripts and things in the back, but everyone will get these books. It's not one of these Kickstarters where you're going to be waiting years to get your books. You will probably, things will probably, we don't know how long it's going to take to get them to the printer. So expect that by the spring, everything will be in your hands. And so we're very excited about that we're basically done with the work.
So when you say you're done, are you talking about like 12 issues of story for each one of them?
No. I know,
I'm kidding.
We're putting out 4 first issues. Let's be clear. And those are all just about done. Lettered, colored, everything. Taylor Esposito, a wonderful letterer who's worked for DC and so many other companies, is lettering 3 of the books. And Matt Smith on Godsend is penciling, inking, lettering, and coloring himself. Wisdom, Tom Mandrake's book, is being colored by his wife, Jen Dursema, who's a wonderful artist in her own right. So there's so much, take me out of the picture, forget me for a minute. There is so much talent involved in this project that if I was a fan, I'd be like, I have to have this. And I have to also take a step back and give credit to David Baldy, who's my partner in all this. David, who is the man behind Spellbound. We have been working hand in glove on this whole thing together. I was joking with him recently, they used to call James Brown the hardest working man in show business. I think David Baldy is the hardest working man in show business. He is killing himself to make sure that we have incredibly high standards, that we're doing the best work that we possibly can and getting it out to people, so that when you finally hold these books in your hands, hopefully you'll be holding something really special.
They all sound, I'm going to be honest, they all sound really, really great. And it is not often where I'll be talking to somebody about a story where I'll get like chills down my spine. But I think that happened definitely more than once during this conversation.
Perfect.
So tell me, or tell us where they can find your Kickstarter.
On Kickstarter.
Okay.
If you follow me on social media, I have the link everywhere.
Right.
On Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, on my website. Go to any of those places, because those links are really, really, really long. For me to try to read that link to you now would be crazy.
You mean you're not going to do that with the numbers and the dashes and everything?
It's a really long link, but if you go look on social media, and also something else I should mention, I know the great thing about Kickstarter is you get these rewards. One of the rewards is a 25-minute Zoom chat with me, or a 25-minute Zoom chat with Matt. I do story consultations. I have a story consultation business. You could have a 2-hour story consult where I'll read your work and I'll discuss it with you. There's original art. There's autographs, there's t-shirts, there's all kinds of fun stuff. So that's what you get. But some people, for whatever reason, are uncomfortable with Kickstarter. If you are, you can go to the Spellbound Comics website, spellboundcomics.com, and just buy the books there. And the people who buy them there, as long as, again, you're supporting all 4 books or buy the trade paperback, you will get to vote on which of the series is the first to continue.
Which one are you voting on?
I can't, because in my head, it depends which one I'm thinking about at the moment. If I'm thinking about Layla, I know the plans I have for Layla, not just for this series, but for 2 more series going forward after that. I see where Wisdom is going. Oh my God, with Godsend, as good as the first issue is, I know that there are literally dozens of characters that we have not introduced yet, and on and on and on. Any Man, the same thing, 50 years worth of story there. So for me, it's like, I vote for all of them. Part of me would love to see, if people vote for all 4, then what we'll do with the next Kickstarter is we'll do issue 2 and another anthology. We'll do it that way. And if the Kickstarter is hugely successful, the reason we, as I said, that we set the goal low was to meet that goal quickly and let people be assured that no matter what, these books are coming out. But if we really, really go high now, maybe we'll have enough money to continue more than one of these books. Maybe we'll have enough money to continue all these books. But because one way or the other, these books will all continue. I will guarantee that. Well, I can't guarantee it because life has no guarantees. But I'll come close to guaranteeing it. We're going to do everything in our power to continue all of these.
That sounds great. Whoop. And then so Spellbound, what's the web address for Spellbound?
Spellboundcomics.com, really simple.
Okay.
And Spellbound also has they're on Twitter at Spellbound Comic, because apparently the limitation of letters you could use, you couldn't get the S in. And Instagram at Spellbound Comics as well. And there's now a Facebook group, a Spellbound Comics Facebook group. So we're everywhere. One of the things that's so interesting about this process, because up till now it's just been doing the work, and now the Kickstarter's out there and you have to beat the drum. And honestly, I'm not that comfortable doing that, but you have to do it, because what you learn with social media is, I announced to the world we're doing this Kickstarter at 1:00. Well, at 1:05, there's 10,000 other people looking at my feed that weren't there at 1:00. And I've seen it with promoting other projects. A month goes by, you think, oh God, I don't even want to mention it anymore. I've mentioned it too much. I don't want to be in people's face. And then someone goes, wow, I didn't know you were doing that. So we have 30 days and we're going to be beating the drum like crazy for these 30 days. And I just hope that anyone that's read or enjoyed my work, I hope they come along with us on this ride, because for me, it's just one of the most exciting projects I've ever been involved in. And I've been doing this a long time. So that's a big statement to make.
That sounds great, and it all sounds really wonderful. I know you have to go, so I'm not going to keep you.
You want to end with one question? You have one?
No, please. Question? Oh, do I want to end with a question?
Yeah. Last question?
Okay, so first of all, I would like you to come back, and I'd like you to come back during Jack Benny month, which is February.
Benny month?
February,
his
birthday was February 14th. So,
right. But I didn't know it was officially dubbed Jack Benny month.
Yeah, well, there's a radio station here in Chicago, and there's a program called Those Were the Days, which you're probably familiar with.
I think I've heard it.
Do it. He's the one. He's the reason why we have all of this stuff available to us.
Really?
He went hunting for it all, and he did that that special that where he was interviewing people from the show. It was called Talking About Jack Benny or something.
That it was an audio special, right?
Yeah.
I've heard all those interviews. Yeah.
And I had someone give you at a convention a number of years ago one of their monthly things with him on it. And so I know that you're somewhat aware of this, but they have Jack Benny month every February, and what they do is they play programs, either things that he guest starred on, like Suspense, or they play like these full blown like episodes. Or one year they did the I Hate Jack Benny Because, and every single week they had like the episode.
Yeah, well, those shows you have to listen to sequentially because they have so many brilliant running gags if you haven't heard the 3 shows before, you don't know why it's funny. If you have heard the 3 shows before, it's hysterical.
Oh my God. Yeah. Having them all together. We mentioned this during our last conversation, but yeah, that was a lot, and it's really, really great stuff. I know you're going back to Spider-Man, and you have
the Lost Hunt, Spider-Man: The Lost Hunt will be out in November. Very excited about that. It's a story that dips into the mythology of Kraven the Hunter, and we get a backstory about him that we never knew before. It takes place in the same time period as the Ben Reilly series, except now we're with Peter and Mary Jane in Portland. Peter and Mary Jane are married. She's very, very pregnant. Peter has no powers, and he faces one of the greatest threats of his entire life, completely powerless, while we introduce a really exciting new character and dive into things about Kraven that we've never known before.
And then are you going to be, I know we talked about this the last time, but I wonder if anything's changed. Is there been any more talk about any more Ben Reilly stories from you?
I have not heard anything about that yet. The minute the phone rings and they ask me to do another Ben Reilly, my answer, I'll tell you right now, is absolutely yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. So what else? Well, I guess that covers it. I'll mention again my novella, The Excavator, which you can find on Amazon, both as an ebook and as a physical book, a piece of work I'm really, really proud of. If you want to experience what my prose is like as opposed to my comic book work, please check that out.
That sounds great. And then all the links to J.M. Dematteis's work are in the link below. It's not there now while we're having the conversation. I'll be putting those in. So by the time people see this,
I'm looking down. I don't see it anywhere.
Yeah, on your keyboard.
Right.
And
I know if it just appeared there suddenly,
Wouldn't that be something?
We'll get there.
Yes, we will. I know we didn't go into like all kinds of different subjects here, but I know that you're pressed for time. I'm pressed for time as well. And I want to thank you again for coming back.
Good to talk to you, Scott. And I look forward to doing a deep dive into Jack Benny with you in February.
We'll do the next time we can do Jack Benny, and we can talk about all kinds of other things too.
Okay.
And then we'll just go from there.
All right, great.
So I'm going to end the live stream here. Hold on one second. Thank you. Thanks everyone for watching.